Dog barks nonstop at lake. What divers pull out leaves everyone stunned. The November mist clung to Blue Pine Lake like a mourner's veil, transforming the familiar shoreline into something otherworldly. Ryan Smith tugged his weathered leather jacket tighter against the morning chill, watching his golden retriever, Luke, navigate the pebbled path ahead with the quiet confidence of a creature who knew this trail by heart. At 53, Ryan found solace in these dawn excursions, a ritual that helped fill the hollowness that had taken residence in his chest since Margaret's passing 3 years ago. Luke's honeygold coat occasionally vanished into patches of fog before re-emerging, his gentle panting creating ephemeral clouds that dissipated into the stillness. The steady rhythm of their morning walks had become Ryan's anchor in a world that had shifted irrevocably when cancer claimed his wife, his high school sweetheart, his best friend, his North Star. When Luke suddenly froze at the northeastern bend of the lake, his posture transformed from relaxed exploration to rigid alertness. Ryan nearly collided with him, startled by the abrupt change. "What is it, boy?" Ryan murmured, following Luke's unwavering gaze toward the misty water. Then it began, a bark unlike any Ryan had heard from his normally well-mannered companion. Not the playful woofs that greeted friendly visitors or the alert yips that signaled a squirrel's presence, but something urgent, insistent, almost desperate. The sound echoed across the lake's surface, shattering the morning's tranquility with its raw intensity. "Luke, enough." Ryan tugged gently at the leather collar, embarrassed by the uncharacteristic display. But Luke remained immovable, each bark seeming to contain a message Ryan couldn't decipher. For nearly an hour, Luke refused to budge, his barking growing hoarser yet no less determined. Ryan checked his watch, calculating the growing certainty that he would miss his first period English class, something that hadn't happened in 27 years of teaching. Kneeling beside his trembling dog, Ryan placed both hands on Luke's sides, feeling the vibrations of each bark resonating through the retriever's body. "Show me, buddy. What do you see?" As the fog thinned slightly, Ryan noticed something in the water, an unnatural geometry beneath the surface, perhaps 20 yards from shore. Something with straight edges nature rarely produced. When Luke splashed determinately into the frigid water, Ryan's hesitation dissolved. He pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed 911. Officer Greg Williams had seen his share of strange calls during 15 years with the Blue Pine County Sheriff's Department, but dog barking at something in the lake wasn't exactly high priority. Still, something about the caller's name, Ryan Smith, the respected high school English teacher whose wife had died of cancer, gave him pause. Not the type for pranks or hysteria. Gravel crunched beneath Greg's boots as he approached the lake's edge where Ryan stood, his golden retriever still fixated on something invisible beneath the water's surface. "Mr. Smith," Greg nodded respectfully. "What seems to be the problem?" As Ryan explained Luke's peculiar behavior, Greg found himself studying the dog more than its owner. Having worked briefly with K-9 units years ago, he recognized genuine alertness rather than random excitement. This wasn't an excitable pet. This was a dog with something significant to communicate. Greg raised his department-issued binoculars, scanning where Luke's attention remained fixed. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just deepening blue-green opacity as the lake bottom dropped away. But adjusting the focus, he caught something, a momentary metallic glint that shouldn't exist in the natural lake bed. "I'm requesting our Marine unit," Greg decided, returning to his vehicle to radio dispatch. The dive team's discovery sent ripples far beyond Blue Pine Lake's surface, a 2004 Toyota Camry containing human remains. Registered to Thomas Hartley, reported missing in December 2012, the vehicle had rested silently in its watery grave for nearly 12 years. The preliminary examination suggests blunt force trauma inconsistent with an accident, Greg informed Ryan later that afternoon, his voice lowered to shield the grim details from curious onlookers gathering beyond the yellow crime scene tape. "We're treating this as a homicide investigation." Luke dozed exhaustedly at Ryan's feet, the morning's frantic barking having depleted his energy. Ryan stroked the golden fur absently, trying to reconcile the peaceful lake of his morning walks with this new, darker reality. "There's something else," Greg added, hesitation evident in his tone. The dive team spotted what appeared to be another vehicle approximately 50 yards further out. They'll investigate tomorrow when conditions permit. Ryan felt a chill unrelated to the autumn air. Another one? What are the chances? That's what we need to determine, Greg replied grimly. One submerged vehicle could be an accident. Two suggest a pattern. That night, sleep eluded Ryan. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw shadowy vehicles beneath murky water, imagining silent passengers watching through algae-covered windows. Luke refused to sleep in his usual downstairs bed, instead maintaining a protective vigil beside Ryan's bed, occasionally rising to pace to the window and back, ears alert to sounds beyond human perception. We can confirm a second vehicle. Detective Lisa Cooper from the county's Major Crimes Unit informed Ryan the following afternoon. A 2007 Honda Civic registered to Eleanor Phillips, reported missing in February 2014. Ryan and Luke had been asked to return to the sheriff's department to provide formal statements, though Ryan suspected Luke's presence had been specifically requested by the investigation team. The golden retriever had settled comfortably at Ryan's feet during the interview, occasionally acknowledging Detective Cooper with dignified regard when she addressed him directly. The medical examiner has confirmed neither Hartley nor Phillips died from drowning, Greg added, the lines around his eyes deepening. Both victims were deceased before entering the water, Hartley from cranial trauma, Phillips from asphyxiation. The clinical terminology couldn't disguise the horror. Someone had murdered these people, then meticulously disposed of their bodies in the lake's depths. We'd like Luke's assistance again, Cooper said, her professional demeanor softening slightly as she glanced at the retriever. His sensory capabilities appear to exceed our technical equipment in certain conditions. With your permission, of course. Ryan hesitated, a protective instinct surfacing. Would it be difficult for him? Greg considered the question thoughtfully. Dogs process these situations differently than humans do. For Luke, it would simply be using his natural abilities to locate something unusual, without the emotional burden we carry. After careful consideration, Ryan agreed. The next day, accompanied by Dr. Melissa Vega, a veterinary behaviorist specializing in working animals, Luke led investigators to a third submerged vehicle, a 2010 Subaru Outback registered to Christopher Michaels. Missing since October 2016. Unlike the previous discoveries, this vehicle contained no remains but rather a waterproof case holding meticulously maintained journals. The writings detailed suspicious activities around Blue Pine County spanning years, vehicle descriptions, locations, timestamps, all recorded in what appeared to be Michael's handwriting. We believe Michaels may have been investigating these disappearances independently, FBI behavioral analyst Dr. Amanda Reeves explained during a briefing in the small conference room that had become investigation headquarters. His notes suggest he'd identified a pattern no one else had connected. One journal entry particularly stood out, dated weeks before Michael's disappearance. September 28, 2016. Followed same truck, blue Ford, mud-covered plates, to abandoned gas station off Route 17. Driver unloaded heavy bags, accessed basement not shown on county plans. Property registered to Shell Company. These aren't random disposals. This is organized, methodical. Someone who belongs here. Asterisk. The abandoned gas station, Ryan said suddenly. Luke and I pass it sometimes on longer walks. I didn't know it had a basement. Within hours, a coordinated operation converged on the derelict Pinewood service station, its weathered facade belying the secrets it potentially harbored. Luke's demeanor changed dramatically as they approached, his body tensing, ears pricked forward, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He senses something, Ryan murmured to Greg as tactical teams secured the perimeter. The discovery of a concealed trapdoor in the former service bay confirmed Luke's instincts. As the heavy door swung upward, revealing stairs descending into darkness, Luke's protective growl intensified. Tactical teams proceeded cautiously, communicating findings through crackling radio transmissions. Evidence of prolonged use. Multiple distinct zones consistent with processing. Documentation extensive. And then, the transmission that stopped every heart above ground. Sir, We have a secured room. Picking up sounds from inside. Possible survivor. Luke's reaction was immediate. A sharp, urgent bark followed by determined pulling toward the entrance. The next 20 minutes unfolded with excruciating slowness until confirmation finally came. Confirmed live victim, adult female, conscious but requiring immediate medical attention. As medical personnel rushed toward the entrance, Ryan knelt beside Luke, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what his morning lake walks had ultimately revealed. "You knew?" he whispered, burying his fingers in the golden fur. "Somehow, you always knew." Her name was Eliza Chambers, reported missing 43 days earlier after a solo camping trip. She had endured 6 weeks of captivity in a makeshift cell beneath the abandoned gas station, surviving on minimal provisions while her abductor, the same man responsible for the lake victims, decided her fate. 2 days after her rescue, Ryan received an unexpected call. "She's asking for you," Greg explained. "Both of you, actually. Says she needs to thank whoever found her." In the hospital room, Ryan barely recognized the woman from news reports, her frame diminished by captivity, yet her eyes held a clarity that spoke of remarkable inner strength. "You must be the hero I've been hearing about," she said, her voice raspy but determined as Luke approached her bedside with uncharacteristic gentleness. In his human companion, Luke stretched his muzzle toward her extended hand, sniffing carefully before delivering a soft lick, a gesture so tender it brought unexpected tears to Ryan's eyes. "He knows," Eliza whispered, her fingers weakly stroking Luke's golden head. "Somehow, he understands exactly what happened." During their brief visit, Eliza shared critical information. Her captor had mentioned a remote cabin, across water twice, with nesting ospreys nearby. This detail, combined with geographical analysis and Luke's remarkable sensory abilities, eventually led investigators to a dilapidated hunting cabin in the county's northern forests. The discoveries within, meticulously organized records spanning 14 years, personal effects collected as trophies, photographic evidence, revealed the full extent of horror that had unfolded in Blue Pine County while its residents carried on in blissful ignorance. Most disturbing was the revelation that Christopher Michaels hadn't discovered the killer's activities. The journals recovered from his submerged vehicle had been written by the killer himself, strategically placed to mislead investigators. Michaels had been another victim, his identity borrowed to create a false narrative. "He created a victim investigating murders to throw us off," Greg explained weeks later as they walked along the now infamous lakeshore. If Luke hadn't found that first car, the implication hung between them. Without Luke's discovery, the vehicles might have remained hidden indefinitely. Eliza would have become another mystery, another face on a missing persons database. Justice for countless victims would have remained eternally delayed. Spring arrived in Blue Pine County with redemptive beauty, dogwood blossoms transforming the lockshores, wildflowers carpeting forest floors, birdsong replacing winter's silence. Nature's renewal seemed particularly meaningful this year, a metaphor made manifest for a community gradually healing from profound trauma. Ryan stood at the edge of Blue Pine Lake, watching Luke splash joyfully through the shallows in pursuit of a floating tennis ball. Their morning ritual had evolved rather than diminished, changed by knowledge of what the lake had concealed, yet reclaimed through persistent return and new memories layered atop old. 4 months had passed since the final victim had been recovered. Christopher Michaels, the real one, had been found in a shallow grave near the killer's cabin. The murderer himself, a local man who had operated undetected for years, had been apprehended trying to flee across state lines. The media attention had finally faded, allowing Blue Pine to rediscover its identity beyond tragedy's shadow. For Ryan and Luke, life had found a new rhythm that included monthly trips to Quantico for Luke's specialized training with the FBI's Victim Recovery Program. Between these official duties, life maintained its comfortable familiarity, literature classes, evening companionship beside the fireplace, and these precious morning walks. "Professor Smith." The greeting interrupted Ryan's reflections. Greg Williams, recently promoted to detective sergeant, approached along the shoreline path, accompanied by a familiar figure, Eliza Chambers, virtually unrecognizable from the fragile hospital patient. Beside her walked a young German shepherd, moving with the focused attention of a service animal in training. "Thought I might find you here," Greg smiled. "Eliza has some news she wanted to share personally." "This is Phoenix," Eliza explained, pride evident in her voice as she introduced the shepherd. "He's training as a trauma support animal for the county's new victim services program. Part of the initiative's being implemented based on what we learned through everything." Ryan watched as Luke and Phoenix established their canine understanding, subtle shifts in posture, minute-ear movements, the almost imperceptible language of creatures who communicate through ancient instincts rather than words. "The program starts next month," Eliza continued, her fingers finding the spot behind Phoenix's ears that made his eyes half close in contentment. "We'll work primarily with children who've experienced trauma, court appearances, forensic interviews, therapy sessions. It's amazing how a dog's presence can make unbearable moments bearable." As they walked together along the lakeshore, Ryan noticed how Luke maintained a protective proximity to Eliza, not hovering anxiously, but positioning himself where he could occasionally brush against her leg, offering silent reassurance with each contact. Near the memorial stone placed where Luke had made his first discovery, they paused by unspoken mutual agreement. Spring sunlight danced across the water's surface, transforming the once ominous lake into something almost hopeful, a reminder that darkness, no matter how profound, eventually yields to light. "What happened at the lake? What Luke started?" Eliza said softly, "It's creating ripples that extend far beyond what anyone could have imagined." When they reached the point where their paths would diverge, Eliza knelt to address Luke directly, framing his face gently between her palms. "I was in darkness," she whispered, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. Literal darkness in that basement, but also the darkness of believing help would never come. "Then you barked and kept barking until someone listened." Her fingers trembled slightly against his golden fur. "You saw what no one else could see. You insisted when others would have walked away. You are the reason I'm standing here today." Luke responded with quiet dignity, pressing his forehead briefly against hers in a gesture of profound connection. In that silent communion, something healed, not just for Eliza, but for all who had witnessed darkness and emerged, changed but unbroken, into renewed light. As Eliza and Phoenix departed, Ryan watched Luke splash joyfully at the water's edge, momentarily transformed from hero back to simply dog, finding uncomplicated happiness in the spring sunshine, the cool water, the present moment. "You know," Greg observed, "for all our technology and training, sometimes the most powerful force for good is the simplest, a being who notices what's wrong and refuses to stay silent about it." Luke returned from the water, proudly carrying a stick, tail sweeping in wide arcs that expressed his uncomplicated happiness. As Ryan reached to take it, their eyes met in that moment of perfect understanding that had characterized their relationship from the beginning, companion souls traveling together through grief and discovery, darkness and light. "Good boy, Luke," Ryan whispered, the simple praise encompassing universes of gratitude. "Very good boy."